You're listening to the Better 2 podcast with DM Needom. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better 2 podcast. Today's guest is H.J. VandeRiet. H.J. has written a book called Otherside, the Serenity. It's part of a series. It's the first book in the series, and it's a YA novel. We talk about her writing process and how she decided to go to a Buddhist college to pursue her writing master's degree, and how at the same time she was doing this, she also got married and had her first 2 kids. So the struggle of doing all these things and making it through. We talk about the writing process, which, as an author, it's something that I can relate to. And before she went to school to become a writer, as far as her master's program, she was pursuing acting. So we talk a little bit about the acting and how acting and writing have the similarities. So I thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. This episode of the Better 2 podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and author of Love is Worth Waiting For, DM Needom. An afternoon at the pool changed Wes's life. When he saw Jen, he knew she was his always and forever. Most nights, Wes spent pursuing his dream of landing a record deal. With Jen looking up at him, he knew nothing would stop him. His dream was fast becoming a reality, until Mason Langford entered their world. While Wes was living his dream, he lost his heart. Now he wondered if he'd ever get her back. Available now, Love is Worth Waiting For by DM Needom at most booksellers. Hi, HJ. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you located at?
I am located in Stockton, California.
I actually had the opportunity to move out there, and I didn't do it years ago.
It's an interesting place. It's not really where I would have imagined myself moving to 10 years ago, but through a whole host of circumstances, it's where I ended up, and I'm happy. So
that's all that matters. And I mean, sometimes life has a way of navigating places we never thought. I had left Chicago and moved back to New Orleans back in 94 or 95, and I was 94. And I had somebody tell me I was going to come back here. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm never going to come back to Illinois. I'm done with Chicago. There's no way. I've been here 27 years since. Yeah. And like I said, I had the opportunity during that 27 years to move to Stockton for a job. And I'm just like, I met a guy. It's nice. I'm happy. We'll stay. So yeah, I get it. Life takes you wherever you're going to go. But it also gives you food for thought as a writer, and that's what you are. So let's take you back to, you started writing when you were 9 years old.
Yes, I did. My dad had a book that he had written as a kid that I read, and it inspired me to write my own first very cute, very terrible draft of a book called Adventures to Pikes Peak. I used to live in Colorado. So, that was kind of like an adventure story. And I kind of just kept writing ever since then.
Do you think it's kind of an escape for you?
Oh, definitely. I love escaping into a good story, and I especially love creating good stories. And I was kind of weird as a kid. So I actually discovered that when I put my weirdness into a book, people called it creative. And so that was a nice way to kind of be weird without people, giving you the side eye.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you're doing things out of the norm, they just don't understand sometimes. And as an author, you can think outside of the box a lot.
Oh yeah, you kind of have to. It just, otherwise we would read books and see movies that are always the same. And I mean, I think books and movies have the same, a lot of them have the same general structure. There's like 5 or 6 basic stories, but being able to think outside of the box kind of helps you put your own creative spin on that. And that's why we keep reading and watching movies.
Yeah, it's the one thing I will admit as a writer that's kind of annoying is when you are watching a movie or a TV show and you're like maybe 15 minutes in, if that, and you're like, okay, this is what's going to happen and this is how it's going to play out. And your spouse or whoever is sitting next to you going, how do you know this? Why do you know this? And it's like, I'm always happy when they throw it completely off base. And I'm like, all right, you surprised me. Because then it's enjoyable. Otherwise, you're kind of like, I enjoy it, but it's not the same. It's predictable to me.
Yeah, I have I love it when a book or a movie surprises me. And I also really love TV shows that I've seen over and over and over again. It's a really strange kind of like, I don't know, paradox or something, but
I think
yeah.
I think there's a comfort to it because I mean I hate to admit that for a while I was binging the originals. I had seen the originals already. I had seen it. I think I've seen it now 4 or 5 times. And it's not that I watch every episode,
Yeah.
but it's comfortable. It's something you can put on. You know what's going to happen, and it's the connection, but it's mindless at the same time.
Yeah, and I like to geek out, you know. I'll binge watch a show over and over and over again until I know like everything about it, and I'll watch all the behind the scenes and stuff. And this actually happened with the show Friends. I was watching a director's commentary, and I actually corrected the directors because in the commentary they got Ross and Rachel's first date wrong. I was like, no, that was not their first date. And then that was when I decided to take a break because I figured I probably had a problem.
Well, it's funny because there's a band that I know, and I was at a date back in 1993, and they have all their tour schedules listed on their website. And apparently, the date I was at, they alleged was canceled. And I'm like, did I dream that? I have pictures from the show, and it was for my birthday, so I know I was there. So, but you guys say it was canceled. And I've thought about reaching out to the band and saying, I have pictures. I was there. But I'm like, how's that going to fly? But yeah, I mean, it's weird when you're like, I had this experience, and then you watch this experience, and I'm sure you're not the only one that said, wait a second, that's not right.
Yeah, it's always a little weird. And I don't know, but I agree. There's something comforting about shows and books that we are familiar with, and maybe that's why we more specific to books. Maybe that's why we keep reading books over and over and over again.
And then back to Friends for a second. My favorite episode is the leather pants episode.
That's a great one.
I know.
I don't know if I could pick a favorite. Yeah, I don't think I could pick a favorite. That's hard. There's a lot of really good ones.
I think it's just because I knew friends that had actual friends that had leather pants, and so it was just kind of a when they're talking, he's sitting there saying he's now made a paste trying to get the pants back on. It's just I had this vision of my own friends, and I'm like, okay. Yeah, too cool for school. Too cool for school. Right. So, did you excel in? I mean, you have a master's degree in writing, so this is going to be a silly question. But growing up in high school and junior high, did you excel at writing? I mean, was it just creative writing, or did you have all the grammatical nuances to put everything together?
I mean, I would say I did well in English and writing, and I always got good grades in those subjects. But I will admit, I was not a big fan of grammar growing up. It was boring, and I thought it was stupid. And I didn't really, at the time, see the importance of it to being a creative writer. I was more focused on writing interesting characters and stories. Now it's really important to me. I still want my writing to sound authentic. I want it to sound like a real person is talking, but I do get really annoyed when people say something and the grammar is wrong. And Sometimes I have to kind of stop myself from being that person. But yeah, I mean, I would say overall, I excelled in pretty much every form of writing, and I
It,
enjoyed.
it's interesting because the first book I put out was done in a journal. And I thought to myself, wow, it's a journal. Who has perfect English in their journal? Yeah, if you're being realistic,
Right.
nah, it didn't fly well. I needed to get an editor and I did, but it's one of those things. And the funny thing is, if you look on Facebook, if you look on Instagram, how many posts are not proper grammar?
Oh, so many.
So it's funny because an author is held to such a high standard, but yet in our normal daily lives, grammar has gone out the window a long time ago, especially spelling, how we've abbreviated things and changed the meaning of words.
Well, and this is one of the things I know there have been young adult fiction books that have kind of leaned into that. It was a long time ago. I can't even remember the title, to be honest, but I remember looking through this one book in the bookstore and it had like text speak. This was back when, you had to pay per character. And so, 4 was a 4 and U
Mm-hmm.
was a U and so on. And so, but it really leaned into that. And I'm sure there are plenty of books now where that's still the case. So I think it depends on genre probably, but if you're creating a world, like a brand new world, like a fantasy world, then I think probably it is important to make sure that your writing is streamlined and makes sense because you're painting a picture in that person's mind.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, what made you decide, since grammar wasn't so important, what made you decide to get a master's degree?
Well, I didn't I initially went to I got my bachelor's in theater. I didn't start out I don't know why I didn't choose to be a writer sooner, or why I didn't major in English. I think I just kind of took this path where I had it in my head I was going to be an actress. And so I went to school for theater and yeah, so then I spent a couple of years after college just doing that and trying to make that work. And eventually I decided, what am I doing? I was wanting to go to grad school. So I decided I should get a master's in English or writing or something. Like, what am I doing? I had looked at my transcripts from college and it was like English A, writing A. And I was like, what am I doing? I need to go to school for this.
Well, and I want to say this, because yes, I did the acting thing as well. The whole thing about acting, you can actually take some of the core values of an actor as a writer, because the main rule in acting is to live in the moment. And if you are truly writing, you are living in that moment. You are bleeding those tears when your character is bleeding those tears.
I actually had a teacher in my undergrad who told me that I very clearly think in terms of scenes when I write, which was probably one of the best pieces of feedback I ever got. But yeah, it made sense, I think in that way. And so yeah, my acting background and my theater background, that kind of informed my writing there for a long time and still does, I think.
I mean, I don't know that the average person sees it that way. Now, one thing
Yeah.
I have to ask two of you is, I'm sure you belong to a lot of book groups or writers groups on social media. Do you ever do you ever get your mind boggled when you have someone that says, they pose a question like, well, do you like this? What is the worst thing in a novel? And you can go through the comments and everybody's got an opinion. Like yesterday, somebody asked about cliffhangers, whether
Mm-hmm.
they liked cliffhangers or not. And you have this whole different perspective that some people are okay with it if this book comes out then and da da da. And it's like you have to get to a point as an author. It's like, they say write for your audience. But if your audience doesn't have a free, everybody has this box checked, what is your audience? You have to ultimately write the story you want to write.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll never be satisfied with your writing if you're always writing for other people, especially if you're the type of writer that isn't just doing it to sell books. I think if you are genuinely in it because you want to create good stories and interesting characters and flawed characters, then you'll write the story that makes the most sense for those characters, and they kind of take on a life of their own eventually. Like maybe not necessarily in the first draft, at least not for me, but usually by about the third draft, like I'll be reading through and I'll say, you know what, that person would never say that, or that person would never do that, or it makes no sense for this person to be here. They should be, they want to go over here. And it's like they become, I know it sounds strange, but it's like they become their own people, like sentient beings or something. It's
No,
very strange. But it's so fun to when that starts to happen, because then they can kind of lead me instead of me leading them. So yeah, and that's kind of what happened with my book. Eventually, they kind of started leading me.
yeah, I mean, my characters do. I will openly say they do talk to me. It's not that I'm hearing voices, but they do navigate me to where I need to go. I started a scene last night. I finished around midnight. At least I thought I was finished, and then I was going to bed, and then they continue to yammer on afterwards, going, "You need to continue it here." And it's like, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to bed. I have a podcast in the morning. So there's a balance there, and it's like you have to allow the free reign of let them give you the idea, write it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You got it out. And the thing is, you can always use that in a different book if
Yeah.
necessary. Everybody's like, well, don't throw it away. I'm like, I'm not going to throw it away. I still have a story I wrote back in high school, which is
Right.
awful, but I still have it. I will
Yep.
never use it, but I still have it. So as a writer, you just need to write at times. So I have to ask, are you I know the answer most likely that you're a plotter, but plotter or pantser?
A little bit of both,
Okay.
actually. So I generally start with the major plot points I want to hit in the first draft, and I write into that. Then in the second draft, I will usually go through and add or take away things as needed, depending on if it makes sense. And usually by the third draft is where, like I said, it starts to kind of run its own course. And then sometimes what I originally intended gets changed because it no longer makes sense and the story shifts. And so I think that's been one of the really cool journeys with this particular book, because it it's still very faithful, I think, to the original draft that I wrote when I was 15, it um but it has developed a lot and changed a lot in other ways, so that's been just really cool to see happen and unfold.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the story I'm working on, the characters I use, they started out when I was in high school, at least in some basic form, and they've evolved. I mean, how many years of my life have I lived since then? So just like you starting out at 15, you've experienced different things in your life now that have shaped your views.
Yeah.
And as you evolve, so does your writing, and so
Yeah.
does the story. You're
Yeah, it really does. It's been really cool to kind of flesh out these characters. And I think they probably initially started out very one-dimensional, and it's been fun to add all these other layers to them as I've grown and, like you said, had experiences that have shaped me. It kind of started to shape them. So that was always really fun.
so you started writing this, and it is the other side, the Serenity. You started
Mhm.
when you were 15 years old, and you were an atheist.
I was in high school. I had a fascination with reincarnation, but I had no real faith to speak of. So I just kind of got it in my head this one day. Wouldn't it be cool to write a book about reincarnation? And so I kind of came up with this other realm called the inner circle. And the premise is that when you die, it's kind of like purgatory in a way. And you have the chance to fix things in your previous life that were wrong so you can be reincarnated. And that was the original premise of the book. And so I just kind of wrote about that. Um, and yeah, so I had this kind of new agey, I was like slightly into tarot at the time, not hardcore into tarot, but I've kind of flirted with it. And then I really liked the idea of reincarnation.
So then you decided that you had the opportunity to go to a Buddhist college.
So yeah, several years go by. I was 15. I went to college. And then I was kind of in a place where I was like, I'm not really sure what I believe. And then I eventually became a Christian. And so then I was, wanting to go to grad school, and I was trying to decide where to go. And I was really interested in this university in Boulder called Naropa, which is a Buddhist inspired university. And so it has a real emphasis on um, mindfulness and um, just, really kind of working through your schoolwork that way. And it's got an amazing writing program that is, I mean, I'd like to think it's world famous. It's probably world famous in like this kind of literary circle, which is like small publishing, zine kind of publishing, and that sort of thing. But it's well known in that circle, and it's kind of a big deal. But I wasn't sure if I should go there or not, because I wasn't sure how I would feel as a Christian at this particular school and whether it was right for me.
And
And it ended up being a really interesting challenge because, I was surrounded by things that, my faith is, kind of frowns upon. But what made me decide to go ultimately was I was actually sitting in church.
okay.
And I was kind of far away, like not really. I wasn't really paying attention, just to be honest. I was in my own world. I was thinking about grad school. I was like, should I go? Should I not go? What do I do? I really want a grad degree, but do I want to go here? And we were talking about when the nation of Israel was in exile. And the pastor was talking about how they were encouraged to stick to they were encouraged to stick to their laws, to stick to their beliefs, but to also become a part of the culture and be part of everyday life. And I think the pastor said something along the lines of, how often do we have an opportunity to be among people who believe something differently than us and learn from them, but still hold on to what we believe. And so I took that as a message that I should go.
It sounds, I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes things are presented to us as signs. And if a message is resonating with you, then obviously it's the right thing.
Yep. And it's a good thing I did, because I got to use this book as my thesis. It actually had a nice journey. I used it when I applied, because you had to submit a portion of your creative writing. So I submitted a short chunk of the book, and then it became my thesis for graduating. And I got to put 120 pages of it into my final thesis paper.
Nice.
So it was really neat. And I just got to think. It really forced me to think outside the box, this school. And I was very much as structured, kind of stuck in that box of structured writing. And this encouraged me to try different formats. And I ended up changing the tenses in the book some. Originally, it was past tense all the way through. But then I decided when it's from the main character's perspective, it's in present tense. And when it's from someone else's perspective, like once she goes to this other world, it becomes past tense, which makes sense because she's gone on and left people behind in her past. And so like stuff like that to just encourage me to think outside the box and do it a little differently was just really neat.
And has it been well received?
So far, I'm still, yeah, I've gotten 6 reviews. So if you read the book and would like to go review it, please do. But they've all been good, and everyone I've talked to who's read it has loved it and thought that the world that I created was really interesting, which and unique, which is probably the best compliment I could get, because as I said, that is really important to me, that the world is unique and the characters are unique.
Yeah. I mean, you're putting a piece of your soul out there, your piece
Yeah.
of your heart. And I don't think everybody realizes what a writer really does. Like you were saying, if you're there to churn out a book every month, which congratulations, I've done one book in 1 month, and the rest of my books take forever, and I'm not lying. And it was rewarding. I'm happy with the story I wrote in a month, because ultimately it ended up being a little over a month when all was said and done, because I ended up changing all things. But the fact of the matter is, it's part of my heart. I'm not just going to go, okay, I want to make sure it works. I want to make sure it's a good story. So putting it out there, it's opening yourself up. And I know people are like, well, just it doesn't matter. It's just a review. Yeah. And so far I've been very fortunate. I haven't had any bad reviews, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And in the social media days, I've talked about this before, somebody on TikTok had posted about Goodreads, and Goodreads is now sometimes somewhat toxic, but apparently somebody wrote gave a 1-star review and said they didn't like the genre of the book. They didn't read the book. Didn't read the book because of the genre, but gave it a 1-star. Okay, so somebody's just gonna, I mean, you can report that, maybe they'll take it off, maybe they won't, but at what point is the review system flawed?
Yeah. Well, and I think Amazon actually, it seems like I read somewhere that they have done, they restructured it to try and weed out that kind of thing. And so hopefully there is a way to do that, because that's really unfair. Like, if you don't like a genre, fine, but you know, don't judge it if you've never read it.
No.
And if you aren't going to read it, then don't rate it. Like,
Well, and that's, somebody had, I was talking, one of my friends, writer friends, the other day, somebody had given her a 1-star review, and they said they didn't finish the book. Well, she took some of her personal life experiences as a 19-year-old, and she's in her 50s now, and put it in the book.
mm-hmm.
And the person's like, I didn't finish this book. I'm giving it 1-star because there's no way a 19-year-old girl would have done this. Okay. And it was in the sexual nature. It was, she got into some toxic situations, and it wasn't all true, but some of it was true. And I said to my friend, I said, obviously certain women, when they hit 40 and 50 years old, somehow forget what they were like when they were 18 and 19 years old and the bad choices they made. I mean, that's the trick of it. You have to be able to look back and go, okay, yeah, when I was 18, I was an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you weren't really an idiot, there's still a little bit of an idiot in us when we're that young, because we think we're invincible.
And I think that's one of the other challenges in writing YA fiction as I'm in my 30s. So, and I mean, I'm a mom, so I have to access my memories frequently. And I have to try not to make my teenage characters too mature,
Mm-hmm.
because I have to try to remember what I was like as a teen. And as a teen, I was goofy and inappropriate. And, my friends and I would make really crude jokes and then things like that. And so that's stuff that I tried really hard to make its way into the book, because it was important that they read like teenagers, because they are.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like for me, my next book, one of the main characters starts out as 18 years old, and she's gone through some traumatic life events. But the fact of the matter is she's 18 years old. Somebody's like, because I said something about her getting married, and they're like, but she's only 18. And I'm thinking, and then she paused for a second. She goes, well, wait a second. I guess I shouldn't say anything because I was married at 19.
No, there are 18-year-olds who get married, like
17-year-olds, and it's funny though, because we, like I said, it's like we get to a certain age and then we forget that we were ever that way. And it's like I remember very well how I was, but a lot of people, I think they don't want to acknowledge that they were that person, and so therefore
there's probably things that they would rather forget. And that makes, I can understand that mindset. But I mean, for me as a writer, I don't want to forget any of it, because if I forget it, then I can't use it. And especially in this particular genre, it's really important that I don't. After the book is done and the series is done, then, maybe then I can move on to other genres that are maybe a little more in my age range. Well, there are plenty of 30-year-olds who read YA. That's not what I mean. I mean like a character that's 30 years old or something like that.
yeah, I get it. I do. I mean, my books are set in the 80s, and some people, well, why the 80s? Well, I grew up in the 80s. I mean, that was when I was in my late teens and, early teens to late teens and 20s. That's when I started experiencing life. And life then, we didn't have all the technology. Yeah. So there's the other challenge of what I'm writing, because you don't have everything at your fingertips like you do now.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's really strange. I'm in that weird category where no one really knows what to call my generation. Some days I'm a millennial, some days I'm an elder millennial, sometimes I'm Generation Y. I mean, they can't decide, but I'm old enough to remember the world before social media and before everything was so instantaneous, but I also grew into that world. And it's just really strange to be kind of on that cusp. And especially that, actually, funnily enough, that actually came up in this book, because when I wrote this, I was 15 and people didn't have cell phones.
Right.
Not yet. I think about a year or two later, my friend got a Nokia phone, one of those indestructible ones, but there were no smartphones yet. There wasn't, I think there was dial up. That's all we had. And so when I wrote the book, the teenagers, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have anything. And in the final draft, I actually had somebody say, it's weird that they don't have cell phones. It's weird that they don't use Wi-Fi. So I did incorporate a flip phone into the book that the main character uses at one point, and I will probably do a little more in the upcoming books, but I wanted to keep it fairly true to where I started, because I created a very specific world and I didn't want to change it too much, because I think it would have affected the tone of the book if I had.
Right. And I get that. I there's the infamous Volkswagen. I have a Volkswagen Cabriolet, and most people are like, whatever. My editor, because I wrote Volkswagen Cabriolet, she's like, why can't you just put convertible? I'm like, because there's 5 different kinds of Volkswagen convertibles, and I want to hit home with somebody that had a Cabriolet, someone that's going to go, yeah, I recognize that car. So to me, sometimes even the cell phone, because in that book it's starts out in 1990, goes through 97, I believe. Even in that book, I had to research what cell phones were available, not just to the average person, but the person that had money.
Yeah.
So, because that's the other thing, I write with people that had money. So I have to know, when did the car phone become available in the 80s? I know we had them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of minute research I have to do. And I'm sure the same is true. I mean, you had to go find a flip phone to be able to, and it was the
Yeah.
Motorola gray flip. Yeah, I had one of those, or not the flip, but at
Simple
least
one.
the,
Yeah,
yeah.
one of those. Well, and I was picturing like a track phone, more like a
Mhm.
track phone, flip phone, because the other thing, the town, the part of town that these kids live in, it's pretty run down. They don't have a lot of money, and so not that you nowadays you can get a cell phone for fairly cheap, but even the cheap ones would, I kind of envisioned them being too expensive. And I also felt that the parents would not buy their kids cell phones. These are not those type of parents. And so they're very much like rugged. It actually takes place, it's like a fisherman town. So the beginning of the book takes place by the ocean. And so it's a little part of town with fishermen and women, and they're just kind of rugged and tough, and they don't really care about that kind of stuff. So to me, the idea of most of my characters having a cell phone just felt really, it didn't feel right.
Right.
So I think I might be able to get away with it with one of my characters in the second book, and so I'll probably go ahead and do that. But for this particular one, it just didn't feel right. And I even asked I asked my niece and my nephew how they felt about, how would you feel about reading a book with a teenager that doesn't have like all that technology and likes older music and things like that. And they actually thought it was interesting. And I like to think that they weren't just saying that to appease me. I told them I wanted them to be honest, because if it's silly, then I would consider uh, finding a way around that.
Yeah.
So that was reassuring, at least.
Did you let them read it?
Um, I have encouraged them to read it. I don't know that they have. They are not particularly into books. So, but I do know my niece on my husband's side, she read it and she liked it. She thought she really liked the fantastical elements of the book. And so that was really cool to find out.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So you said it's a series, obviously. So are you working on the second book?
I am working on the second book. I have an outline in place, and I just need to find the time to go get some solitude so that I can churn it out. But I have like a fourth of a draft that I had started back when I was in grad school. And so I have about 30,000 words of that written. And so I'll go through that and take from that. And then my goal is to get up to about 80,000 words for the second book, because it's going to get much more complicated, and we get to explore some new realms within the story that haven't been explored yet. So I'm really looking forward to that.
What are your ideas about marketing? I mean, as far as, uh, have you done it all yourself? Are you making all your little memes, and or is marketing something that you find very awkward and complicated to do?
A little bit of both. I'll admit I'm not too big of a fan of it because my life is kind of crazy and it's hard to find the time, but I have been doing some of the marketing myself. I have had some help from a book marketing person named Mary Waluski, and she's been really wonderful. She actually she helped me with the find out about podcasts, and so we have a couple things in mind to do to get the book out there. I'll probably run some specials here pretty soon to kind of amp up the book. But yeah, I've just been sharing on social media and just talking to people about it.
That's all you can do. I mean, there's so many books out there now. It's hard to grasp the audience. There are book parties on Facebook that you can do, but I don't know that there's always a lot of participation.
Yeah. I do also blog a little bit on my writer website. So I try to keep up with that. I've posted about each character, like a little blurb about them, and I've done some writing prompts. I had some writing prompts on there, so hopefully people who also enjoy writing can find those and get some creative inspiration from that.
So when do you think the next book? I know you said you got to get the time and everything. When are you shooting for the next book to come out?
I would really love to have it released by the end of next year. If I could get the time to sit down and carve out that draft, I think I could get it done, and that would be my goal, is to try to get it out by the end of next year.
Hopefully, I mean, I
Yeah. It's probably
yeah.
ambitious considering that this book took so long for me to actually release.
My follow-up to my first book, My Days, I finished the first draft back in 2019. It was done. I had already had another book, Love is Worth Waiting For. I had that one finished, and I was like, I don't like the draft. I'm done. Not going to do that. I'll put the
Mhm.
other book out, which I did. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to start again. And so I started tinkering, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden, this other character from that other book decides he wants to be involved with one of the main characters. And it's like, off to the races we go. And I'm still, here we are 2 years later, and I'm still messing around with this. However, I appreciate that he came in because it has changed the whole diversity of the story. But yeah, I mean, I thought I was done again. I had my editor lined up 3 times this year, and I've blown every date. She was like, it's okay, I'm overwhelmed anyway. So it all worked out, but it was just okay. So I'm not releasing a book this year. I hope to have it out next month, but it's not happening this year. Hopefully it'll happen next year. Life
Right?
life happens. I mean, life
It's true.
happens.
And I really wish that I was a writer who could write in the thick of noise and chaos. But I really do benefit from being off grid. And actually, the best time to write, for me, is when I'm on the Amtrak train.
Okay.
Because, yeah, because there's no Wi-Fi, there's no TV, and you're surrounded by interesting people who are coming and going, and beautiful scenery that you can look out the window at, and it forces you to find something else to do and be creative. And so the last train ride I took, I wrote like all these poems, and I think I wrote like a short flash fiction piece. And then on the way back, I was actually going to a writing residency for the week. And so on the way back, I was doing my final essay from that week because I had to submit it. And yeah, I got it done on the train and submitted it when I got into Sacramento. So
Nice.
I had and I got to read, which is always great because I never get to sit for more than, like, a morning coffee to read a book. And so it takes me a really long time to get through books these days. So I love being able to just sit and read.
And that's the thing, as an author, sometimes you don't have enough time to read and write. And I tend not to, because I like what I write, and I like the genre that I write. So therefore, I don't read a lot because I don't want somebody else's ideas to bleed into my ideas. So it's
Yeah.
like I can't read as much as I would like to read because I don't want to take over somebody else's ideas.
I relate to that. I kind of feel the same way. I have to be careful the things I read. Right now, I'm reading more nonfiction than fiction, so I don't think there's a whole lot of danger there. So that's good. But yeah, I would like to eventually get to a point where I'm reading more fiction again.
Yeah, I mean I'm sticking to nonfiction as well because it's not gonna bleed in, and
Yeah.
it's safe.
Yeah.
But I mean, authors are like, yeah, I read a lot. Yeah, I do too, but I only do it when I'm not cross contaminating.
Yeah.
So I take it, I know you're a mom, so that's most likely what is keeping you from doing a lot, correct?
Yes, I am very busy being a mom. I have 3 kids, and my husband tends to work away from home, so I am with them by myself for a few days at a time before he comes home. So yeah, that definitely makes it more of a challenge for me to sit down and carve out writing time because they're
Yeah.
all young. I have a 1-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. I when I was writing during my first marriage, I had a 5 and a 7-year-old, and they were around until they were 8 and 10. So fortunately, I had them going to school at times, so I was afforded the luxury of writing. But when they're that little,
Yeah.
when they were 4 and 6, no, no, that wasn't gonna happen. Just don't
I
even try.
actually I got married in 2013. I started grad school a week later, and then a month later I found out I was pregnant with my first son.
Wow. So
It was eventful. Yeah, and it actually took me an extra year to finish my grad degree because I had my first two while I was attending.
wow.
And so I had to take breaks along the way. And so I took a slower pace. I think it took me 3 years, 3.5 years instead of 2,
But
but I did finish.
exactly, I was gonna say, but you did finish, and that's what's important.
Well, and I told people you have to really want it. You have to really want that degree if you have kids and you want a grad degree, you have to really want it because it is hard to do, but it is totally worth it. So
Well, and then you have, dare I say, pregnancy brain.
oh yeah. Yeah, that made writing and uh as they call it at Naropa, contemplative thinking. Um hard to contemplate when your brain is, chock full of all these pregnancy hormones and new mom hormones and you're like you can't even finish a sentence talking to someone, let alone write something profound.
Profound. What's that? Oh, I have no idea. I get. I can only imagine. I've never been pregnant, so I can only imagine. But I mean, having kids alone will mess with your head.
Yeah, I mean, you're tired. That's a big part of it, and you're juggling a lot all at once because you have this whole tiny person that you are responsible for who cannot do anything for themselves at all, and people who you don't realize how much you have to do for a baby or a kid until you have one and realize what they can't do for themselves yet.
Yeah,
Luckily now they're older, they can do a lot of stuff for themselves, so that's a lot easier, but
yeah.
yeah.
But that 1-year old's creeping into the 2-year-old, so that means the terrible twos are coming.
I actually didn't find the 2s as bad as I found the 3s.
Okay.
3s are the ones that nobody tells you about. 3 is the one that makes you wanna tear your hair out. 2 is just mildly inconvenient, um, but 3 is the one that makes you wanna tear your hair out. Because
I
by then they can talk and they can say they can talk in complete sentences and they start to kind of develop their own sense of self apart from you. And so when you want them to do something and they don't want to do it, they just flat out tell you no. And so you have to you know kind of figure out a way to get them to do it.
Yeah, when you learn how to negotiate.
Oh, yes, negotiation, definitely. And every kid's different. I mean, all 3 of my kids are so different from each other. I've got one who's like a rule follower, and so him I don't really have to worry about. I have another one who is my wild child, and she wants to run down the street. She'd run down the street naked if I let her. Like she's she's super friendly and bubbly, but she'll talk to anyone, literally anyone. And then my 1-year-old is just, he's so goofy. It's just funny.
Maybe a
He's
little
gonna be a character.
comedian.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be a character, which, he's the youngest, so of course he's gonna be a comedian. Like, I think that's like the general rule, right? When you're the youngest, you're supposed to be the clown, the class clown.
Yeah, my husband was the class clown, and he was the Joker, and there's songs that he's changed lyrics to that I can never unhear now. He's been gone for over a year now, and I still, if Heat of the Moment pops on the radio, if I'm at a store or whatever by Asia, he changed some of the lyrics that are just not really appropriate for me to say here, and they come to mind, and I'm just like, really great, thanks for reminding me.
I had a friend in school who did that kind of thing, and I can't unhear it anymore either. I can't think of the song off the top of my head, but yeah, same thing. It was inappropriate, so you can't say it here. But yeah, I was a middle child, so I had the like negotiation thing down, and the hey, let's all just get along sort of mentality.
Yeah, for me, here's the really weird thing for me, because technically, for 12 years of my life, I was an only child.
Oh.
And then I became a half sister, but she didn't live with us. And then 2 years later, I became a stepsister, but they lived with us, but then they didn't live with us. And then later on, I became a stepsister again. So then I'm the oldest out of all of this, but yet I'm still an only.
Right.
So it's very, because both the marriages have ended. So technically, I guess that means I'm back to being an only child, because my half sister has passed as well. So it's like,
huh. Yeah, I have a younger sibling, and I have 2 older siblings. And then I also have half siblings. So it's a very strange structure. I usually just tell people I'm a middle child because that's the easiest to and it's the one I identify with most. I'm probably I might have a little bit of the younger sibling mentality also, but I really sympathize with middle children, because I often, felt very much like, okay, everybody, let's just get along, and I'll go with the flow, and yeah, we can watch what you want to watch, or sure, let's go eat at that place. And I didn't really have much of a opinion, or I was pretty ambivalent most of the time.
Well, and I mean, when you look at birth order, the only child and the oldest child kind of go hand in hand anyway. So, I mean, I guess really it didn't affect me, but it was just weird, because it's like all of a sudden I have siblings. What?
Right.
So, I mean, I understand the sibling thing. And I look at, my husband had 4 siblings. And, I was always like, wow, it's really cool to have siblings, da, da, da. And then after his parents passed, I'm like, and I saw the tension even before his parents passed between the siblings. I'm just like, maybe it's better to be an only child.
Yeah.
A lot less stress.
I mean, I can't really say for sure, because my experience is, having lots of siblings. I can certainly see where it would be less chaotic. You get your own space, your own things.
But it sucks at playing board games.
Yeah, that would not be fun. No, not by yourself.
One Christmas, I wanted a Barbie dream house, and I was over at my grandparents' house. I don't know why I was there for Christmas Eve. Maybe they had a Christmas party. I don't know. When they came to pick me up, they had this giant chimney-looking bag and had all my Christmas presents in that Santa brought. And I opened them up, and there's like, I think 20 board games. And granted, we played a couple of them, and I took them over to my friend's house, but there was this thing called Gnip Gnop that I really, really wanted. It was just 3 balls, you had paddles, and you had to hit it back and forth. As an only child,
I mean, I'm like, how am I supposed to do this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what my parents were thinking. I really don't. Just because I wanted that didn't mean it was a good choice.
Right.
And half
Maybe
the other board games I was just kind of like, okay.
they might have had the like best of intentions to play the board games with you. Like I know like I think my husband and I are kind of like that. We went through a phase where we were buying board games and we really did have the intention of sitting down and playing them. I'm not huge into board games. Like I'll sit and play one if someone invites me, but it's not really something I like am hankering to do. Whereas my husband really, really does love them. And so, but we don't sit down and play them that often because the kids are so young. So they're just kind of sitting in the closet waiting for them to get old enough for us to do it.
Well, at least you have the intention. I don't know what they, like I said, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I think we played a couple of the games maybe once and it was like I had to beg, but it's fine. It's just one of those things where I look back and kind of laugh going, you got the only child board games. I can understand if I had siblings or something, but at that point there were no siblings. It was just me and them. So anyway, yes, more from my screwed up childhood. But hey. Anyway.
It makes good fodder for the book, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I actually had somebody tell me, with everything that I've been through in my life, how did I handle it? And it's like, I just did. It was life. And they're like, but you turned out okay. And I'm like, yeah. And ultimately, here's the thing. It gave me fodder for my writing, and it gave me, it has allowed me to be able to talk to a diverse range of people on the podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because somebody can come, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, yeah, your experience, I think it depends on, I do think some of it depends on perspective. Like if you are of the perspective that your experiences shape who you are, whether they're good or bad, then I feel like that makes it easier to navigate the difficult times. I would also argue that having faith makes that easier too. At least for me, it does. But yeah, I mean, all that stuff is, I've had people ask me that question too. Like, how did you turn out so normal? And I'm like, I think normal's relative. So, what, I don't know what you consider normal, but I would not call me normal.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's kind of like the definition of love, because what does love mean? Are you in love with somebody or do you love somebody? And that was something that was posed a lot when I was younger. People would ask that question. It's like, aren't they the same? No, they're not. Okay. So what is normal? What is normal to me may not be normal to you. And I think it goes back to something I've talked about with another guest about expectations. We have this expectation of what normal is supposed to be. You're normal. I mean, is somebody saying you're normal because you're married and have kids?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is probably, yeah. I mean, I guess
I didn't mean to trouble.
No, I know. I guess I probably am more normal now in the conventional sense because I have kids and I'm married and I take the kids to scouts and all that stuff. But I would say that I'm just kind of quirky.
Well, and this is what I was going to say. If from a cursory look, somebody can look at you and say, okay, well, let's see, she's married, she has kids, she does the family thing. So these are all normal things. This is somebody that would basically say, how are you? And you say, fine. And they're like, okay, this is the cursory check. We're not going to dig any deeper. I see what you are. And that's it. The cover is there. I'm not reading the blurb. I'm just looking at the cover. Where if they read the blurb, it would be like, oh, wait, there's more to this. So, I mean, putting it in book terms, that's the easiest way to do it. When people look at me, they're like, oh, well, you're a widow now. I'm like, I hate that word. Don't call myself that. When I got divorced, I was single again. I'm single. That's the way it is. Yep. I was not I was a stepmom. Well, some people are like, well, you're not a mom because they're not your kids. I did everything a mom had to do. I was the primary caregiver. So don't sit there and say they weren't my kids. I'm not a mom, because at that time, they were my kids.
Yeah.
And it's the like I said, this is the book cover. We're just going to judge it. And if they're not your biological kids, okay, so what if I would adopt them? And this was family that would tell me this. So it got to be an interesting discussion, because it's like, why are you telling me this from your perspective?
Yeah. Read the blurb.
Yeah. And maybe that's what we need to do. Quit looking at the cover and read the blurb, because you can actually see if somebody's hurting. I've been watching the documentary on with Leah Remini. I'm not going to say what it is, because I don't want them to come after me. But I mean, I find it very interesting that, and I had talked to somebody previously on the show about being in a cult, and it's very interesting how people will be so focused on a certain point that they will dismiss anything else, because this is the image. And here's somebody suffering, and this is the reason I bring this up. Somebody is suffering. They're wanting to get out of this. They want to, and the only way they can see is to get out is by killing themselves, because nobody is listening. They're just looking at the cover. Oh, well, you're functioning. You should be fine. So yeah, we need to start reading the blurb.
We really do. Read more blurbs.
Yes. Anyway, sorry I got off on a weird tangent.
Oh, that's okay. Tangents are good.
So your book's available on Amazon. You have an Instagram account. You have a website. Are you on Facebook as well?
I am on Facebook as well. Yes. Okay. All under HJ VandeRiet.
All right. And the name of the book is Otherside, the Serenity. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Oh, let's see. I guess just that I hope people enjoy the book, and I just want people to enjoy the book. So go check it out and be interested. Read the blurb.
And if you like the book, leave a review.
Yes, that would be helpful. And then, I can get a sense of how good, and what I need to improve. So that is always good to know.
That's the one thing, people, they'll leave the star rating reviews without leaving a review. And the problem with that is you're not giving me anything to know what I can tweak and make better.
Yeah, I like constructive feedback. It's how I grow. It's how I grow. I grew and continue to grow as a writer. So, preferably something beyond this is really great or this really sucks. Something with a little more meat to it, and I will definitely read it. So,
well, I thank you, HJ. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's been fun.
Yes.
So HJ had some good stories, and we did talk a little bit about siblings and in life in general, and how we can use those things that we've experienced for fodder. And I actually do like the fact that we discussed how we look at people, looking at people, and it goes back to the labeling thing that's been talked about prior in the podcast, but looking at people as book cover. You look at the book cover and you get this feeling for the book, but are you really getting a feeling if you haven't read the blurb? And in a way, that's kind of how life is. I mean, people are looking at you and they're judging, and whether they think you're a good book or not. So you kind of have to look at that blurb to get a little bit more detail, to see if this person is actually the person you need to be hanging with. I think that makes sense, at least a little bit. And it's a very, dare I say, dumbed down version of looking at the way life works and how we act with people. So if you want her book, the links are in the notes. And if you want to support the podcast or you want to be a guest, reach out. Donna at thebetter2podcast.com. We have the website. All the episodes are there, better2podcast.com. And we're on social media. You can find us there. If you go to the website, all our social media links are there. So I thank you as always for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And catch you next time. Bye. You are listening to the Better 2 Podcast with DM Needom. Thank you.